Hello.
Hi everyone. My wife has returned from her exciting adventures, and we're here to do part 2 of the Song of Songs.
Right, so we wrote a second episode, but then we actually came across some commentary that looked really great, and it's by a famous Hebrew scholar from the 11th century.
So this guy is Ibn Ezra, complete legend in the Hebrew world. And what he does for this book is he goes through the grammar as one complete commentary and goes through all of the ins and outs of what this phrase could mean. And then instead of building the story without that exposition, he builds the story on top of that exposition. So he's wondering, what are the many different things that how can we interpret this sentence? And then on top of that sort of interpretive layer, he's building the narrative layer. The narrative that we're presenting isn't going to be particularly surprising or anything that's going to be different to the commentaries that you've probably already read. But what's really amazing about it is the way that everything hangs together. So I think if you've already listened to the recording, the Passion Translation or the KJV translation that we stuck in the playlist earlier, you'll probably notice that there's kind of verses that just sort of hang out of place with the way that the book puts structure around them. What kind of blew me away with Ibn Ezra's was this is the only commentary I've ever read where everything seems to hang together completely.
Right. So we will absolutely talk through different commentaries and ideas of how the narrative is structured in Song of Songs more widely, but in the next video. But for now, we just wanted to read you through the text. So before we start, it's worth noticing that he didn't write notes on every single verse. So where he skips something, we'll just read it from the KJV. So this is going to be our reading of Ibn Ezra's translation of
the Song of Songs.
Song of Songs, yeah.
Which is sonnet. And so sets the scene. Scene 1. A damsel outside the city, in the vineyard, sees a shepherd passing by and falls in love with him and longs after him in her heart. She says,
"Oh, that he would kiss me with repeated kisses." Then, as if he were listening to her, she says, "For thy love gladdens the heart more than wine. Because of the fragrance of thine ointments, for thy name is an ointment which is poured forth, the fragrance of which is diffused around. The damsels love thee."
Each of the damsels says to him, "Draw me. Were even the king to bring me to his apartment, we would rejoice more in these." She turns to address her damsels, who are the daughters of Jerusalem.
"If, compared with you, I am black like Kedar's tents, on which the sun is always striking, yet I am comely and fair of form like the curtains of King Solomon. Look not upon me, because I am black, because the sun hath looked upon me. My mother's children were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyards, but mine own vineyard I have not kept."
She turns to her beloved and says,
"Tell me where thou feedest thy flock, and where thou makest them to rest. Then, shepherd, I will turn, for I rather fear I may get mixed with the flocks of thy fellow shepherds."
He replies, "If thou knowest not, betake thee in the foot tracks of the flock, and go to the little kids, seeing thou art but little in years thyself, above tens of my companions, where my place is. I have compared thee, O my love, to a company of horses in Pharaoh's chariots. Thy cheeks are comely with rows of jewels, thy neck with chains of gold. We will make thee borders of gold, and studs of silver." She answers,
"Although I have a sweet fragrance, the king indeed in his saloon doth long to inhale my nard. Yet thou hast a far sweeter fragrance, for my beloved is as a bundle of myrrh, and I long for him to lie all night betwixt my breasts, that I may embrace him who is like a cluster of campfire in En-gedi.
Behold, thou art fair, thine eyes are dove's eyes, like the eyes of a dove which loves its mate and never leaves it."
Behold, thou art fair, we need only a soft couch and cedars for the beams of our house, where we can dwell in retirement, for here under the open sky I am like the rose of Sharon.
"Thou art not like the lily of the valleys, for altogether, but as the lily amongst thorns, so art thou amongst the daughters."
As the apple tree in the garden compared with other trees, so is my beloved for whom I long. He brings me to the house of wine, and I drink abundantly with him. And were he to display his love openly like a standard, then would I say to the damsels, support me with flagons of wine, spread me a couch of apples, to smell and eat with the wine, as a sick person does, before whom they put flagons of beverage and apples. Finally, let my beloved's left arm be under my head, and I would charge the damsels not to wake me from sleep till the impulse of love draws nigh.
Scene 2. The days in the vineyard are now over, and the damsel returns home. The trees are beginning to blossom. She says,
I hear my beloved. He runs like a gazelle, peeping from the lattice. Perchance he sees me. My beloved speaks and says to me, Thou art like a dove in a high place where thou art hidden. Let me see thy countenance, let me hear thy voice.
She says to her attendants,
Go ye to the vineyard, and guard it from the foxes, for my beloved is mine, and I am his, who is like a fawn that feeds among lilies, for his fragrance is scattered abroad. And thou, my beloved, turn now to thy place, until the breeze of day blow, after the shadows lengthen, for it is now midday.
So her beloved goes his way. Scene 3. At night she has a dream. She says,
Night after night, as I lay on my bed, I seem to go round the city, searching for my beloved. I rise now, and go about the city in the streets, and in the broad ways I will seek him whom my soul loveth. I sought him, but I found him not. And I asked the watchman, Have ye seen him whom my soul loveth? It was but a little that I passed from them, but I found him whom my soul loveth. I held him, and would not let him go, until I had brought him into my mother's house, and into the chamber of her that conceived me. I charge ye, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, by the roes, and by the hinds of the field, that ye stir not up, or nor awake my love, till he please.
Scene 4. On waking, she goes forth to seek him. On seeing her, he is astonished and says, Who is this coming up from the wilderness, like pillars of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense? Mark the couch of Solomon. He expresses his astonishment at how she could go alone. See, even King Solomon is obliged to have many valiant men to guard the object of his love, in his fear that robbers may carry her off by night. Further, he is obliged to make a palanquin, and all this for the sake of one of the daughters of Jerusalem. He made the pillars thereof silver, the bottom thereof gold, the covering of it of purple, the midst thereof being paved with love, for the daughters of Jerusalem. He also proclaims that they shall do him honour, and he puts on his head a royal diadem, to appear great in his loved one's eyes. And yet, thou, my companion, art fairer still. Thou hast dove's eyes within thy locks. Thy hair is as a flock of goats that appear from Mount Gilead. Thy teeth are like a flock of sheep that are even shorn, which come up from the washing, whereof every one bear twins, and none is barren amongst them. Thy lips are like a thread of scarlet, and thy speech is comely. Thy temples are like the piece of pomegranate within thy locks. Thy neck is like the tower of David, builded for an armoury, whereon there hang 1,000 bucklers, all shields of mighty men. Thy two breasts are like two young roes that are twins, which feed amongst the lilies.
This is the first of a sequence of poems where the couple describe each other. In this poetic description, the shepherd is using a lot of imagery about symmetry and touch. These are the kind of cute animals and baby animals you might see in a modern petting zoo, and in that you have the concept of gentleness. If you want to be able to pet a wild baby deer or goat, you have to coax them over with food and get them used to you over a long period of time. And as a result, this is one of the ways the book links back to the Garden of Eden, when animals weren't afraid of man.
As thou sayest to me, until the breeze of day blow, and the shadows flee away, turn, my beloved, and be thou like a gazelle or a young hart amongst the mountains of separation. I took me to the mountains of myrrh, because of its sweet fragrance, that is, to thyself. But how can I praise thee more? For thou art altogether fair. Come now with me away from Lebanon, for why wilt thou look on me from a high place, and frighten me from coming to thee, as if on that spot were a den of lions? Thou hast ravished my heart, my sister, my spout. Thou hast ravished my heart with one of thine eyes, with one chain of thy neck. How fair is thy love, my sister, my spout! How much better is thy love than wine, and the smell of thine ointments than all spices. Thy lips, O my spouse, drop as the honeycomb, honey and milk are under thy tongue, and the smell of thy garments is like the smell of Lebanon.
The Hebrew words here translated as sister is understood by most commentators as being a reference to their equality. So you could read this as, thou hast ravished my heart, my equal, my spouse. Thou hast ravished my heart with one of thine eyes, with the chain of thy neck.
Behold, thou art regarded as a close-barred garden, into which one cannot enter. Thy plantation is as a garden of pomegranates, and all choice fruits, with all spices intermixed, he means to say. In thee is blended every sweet and pleasant smell. Thou art like a fountain of gardens, a well of living waters, which refresh the weary soul.
Awake, thou north wind, let my beloved come. Her meaning is, let my beloved now go to his own garden, but as the north and south winds will awake and blow upon my garden, so that its spices shall flow forth, my beloved can then come back. So he goes his way.
But she longs for him after he says to her, I am come into my garden, and have gathered my myrrh, and have given my friends and companions to eat, and have given them to drink their fill. Scene 5. She sees in a dream the form of her beloved.
She says, although I was asleep, my heart was awake, and it appeared to me that my beloved was come. I heard the voice of my beloved knocking, saying, my head is filled with dew through waiting outside. He tarried a little while. Then I thought in my heart, but I have taken off my dress.
Ibn Ezra, in his commentary, passes over a couplet of verses here that seem to be about a sexual dream. Modern people often push back on ancient commentators that do this and call them prudish. I think this reaction misses something. Sex and dreams are two of the most private experiences that someone can have. When you take them and put them in front of everyone, they lose some of that specialness that makes them what they are. So we skip to scene 6. She awakens. She says to the daughters of Jerusalem,
I charge you, what will ye tell him? Tell him I am sick with love.
They say, what is thy beloved more than another beloved, O thou fairest among women? What is thy beloved more than any other beloved, that thou dost so charge us?
My beloved is white and ruddy, the chiefest among 10,000. His head is as the most fine gold. His locks are bushy and black as a raven. His eyes are the eyes of doves by the rivers of waters, washed with milk, and fitly set. His cheeks are as a bed of spices, as sweet flowers. His lips like lilies, dripping sweet-smelling myrrh. His hands are as gold rings set with the beryl. His belly is as bright ivory, overlaid with sapphires. His legs are as pillar of marble, set upon sockets of fine gold. His countenance is as Lebanon, excellent as the cedars. His mouth is most sweet, yea, he is altogether lovely. This is my beloved, and this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem.
This is interesting. In the previous poem, we've seen man relate to the woman, to nature, or to Garden of Eden imagery. Here you get some of that, but you have all these hard and solid building materials. You could read this as her saying he's muscular, or that he's been building his body. But you could also think of these as materials in terms of their malleability. Throughout history, humans have loved gold because it melts at a low temperature and is easy to work with, and you can make something beautiful out of it. Perhaps she is looking forward to making something with this man. These are also the materials and imagery we would associate with Solomon's temple. So from a Christian perspective, you could think about God breathing into him and making him into a beautiful temple. And she wants to worship God for the wonderful way he's made.
So the daughters of Jerusalem say,
Whither is thy beloved gone, O thou fairest amongst women? Whither is thy beloved turned aside, that we may seek him with thee?
my beloved is gone down to his garden, to the beds of spices, to feed in the gardens, and to gather lilies. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. He feedeth among the lilies.
Scene 7. In the garden. He replies on seeing her, Thou art fair like bannered hosts. Thy hair is as a flock of goats, thy teeth like ewes, thy temple like pomegranate blossom. He means, behold, these are the signs that thou art my former love, and thou art not to be confounded with others. For thou art one, and none resembleth thee. Behold, King Solomon hath 60 queens, my dove, though, is but one, and even those queens would congratulate her, and marvelling exclaim, Who is this that looketh forth as the dawn? I am come down into the nut garden, to see if the pomegranates have blossomed, and that we may caress there.
Not knowing in what garden thou mightest be, my soul put me in chariots of a noble people to seek thee. I heard all who were looking at me saying, Come back, O Shulamite. I answered them, What is to be seen in the Shulamite, that ye have all come forth to see the dance of Manaheim?
Now we have a section where the man is seeing his new wife in the nude, and we get a poem that builds on the imagery in the previous two. In the first, he was describing her in this sort of cute animal / Garden of Eden imagery. In the second, she was building on that by adding to it imagery of materials and the carvings of the temple. In this one, we see all of those strands of imagery continue, but also a new one, and a new one that's going to be strange for modern readers. Geography. Thine eye is like the fish pools in Heshbon, by the gate of Bath-barim. Thy nose is the tower of Lebanon, which looketh toward Damascus. This is really interesting. You could see this as an ordinary love story between a simple shepherd and this woman who works in her family vineyard, as being a microcosm of the health of the nation. This is a lot of what we discussed in chapter 1. Their love is going to be the mountain that their family is going to be built on. Seeing them treat each other well is going to be the thing that points their children in the right direction on their journey of life. This is also reminiscent of what we see in Genesis. God promises Abraham that he will be the father of a nation, and then we see how the love between him and Sarah and their son unfolds across the generations into the nation of Israel. Part of what's happening here is the couple are seeing themselves as participating in that story and in that geography.
After this, she says, I am my beloved's, and his desire is for me. Come, my beloved, let us go into the countryside. Let us spend the night in the village. Let us go early to the vineyard to see if the vines have budded, if their blossoms have opened, and if the pomegranates are in bloom. There I will give you my love. The mandrakes give a smell, and at our gates are all manner of pleasant fruits, new and old, which I have laid up for thee, O my beloved. Oh, that thou wert as my brother! When I should find thee without, I would kiss thee. Yea, I should not be despised. I could bring thee openly to my mother's house, and she would teach me how to cause thee to drink of well-spiced wine. Then she says again, Now that I have his left arm under my head, my desire is all fulfilled. They are now asleep.
This is really exciting. Much earlier in the poem, she was excited about introducing him to her family, particularly her mum. They've just had this romantic time in a secret garden, and now it looks like she is leading him to her childhood home. In the text of the book, we don't see anything that looks like a conversation with her mother, but it looks like it went really well. We can see this from what happens in the final scene. Scene 8. She rouses her beloved and begins to speak.
Who is this coming up from the wilderness, who has sought her former love, as I have done? I have roused thee under the apple tree, beneath which we were making our night's rest, to remind thee that under it thy mother brought thee forth. She means, because she conceived under that tree, therefore thy fragrance is like the fragrance of the apple. Put me now on thine heart as a seal on thine hand, and on thine arm as a seal.
This is reprising lots of imagery from earlier poems. Part of what is fun is that whilst we previously had the man talking to her about what it looks like when Solomon comes out of the wilderness with his soldiers and his wives, it's now her that's coming out of the wilderness with him. She feels like a king. I've often heard Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice described as being about battles fought in ballrooms, where you have these heroines in their dresses warring over the men that they're interested in. To me, it feels like this is the culmination of that. She is victorious. She now has the shepherd that she saw at the beginning of the book and fell in love with.
Set me as a seal upon thy heart, as a seal upon thine arm. For love is as strong as death, jealousy as cruel as the grave. The coals thereof are coals of fire, which hath the most vehement flame. Many more waters cannot quench love, neither can the floods drown it. If a man would give all the substance of his house for love, it would be utterly contented. What has come of that saying of one of my brothers, who said, We have a little sister. What shall we do for our sister in the day when her espousal shall be proposed? If she has preserved herself and is a wall, we will build upon her a palace of silver, meaning we will decorate her with ornaments. But if she is a door, we will enclose her with boards of cedar, and she shall be shut up. She says, Behold, I am a wall, and my breasts are like towers. Then I was in the eyes of those who love me as one that finds favour. Solomon had a vineyard at Baal-Hamon.
She says all this to praise herself and the depth of her affection for her beloved. Her meaning is,
Behold, King Solomon let his vineyards to keepers, taking for the fruit of the vineyard which they brought him 1,000 shekels of silver. But I have not done so, for my own vineyard I keep as mine. I delight in it with thee, and take no pleasure in wealth, neither in capital nor interest. So take thou, Solomon, the wine of thy vineyard, and let the keepers also take their 200 besides.
he replies, Thou that dwellest in the gardens, my fellow shepherds, are come and are listening to thy voice. Let me hear it and say to me, Away, my beloved, before they perceive that I am with thee in the midst of the garden.
So Ibn Ezra's reading really flows with a lot of other commentaries. You get to this verse or that verse and it doesn't quite make sense. Why is this person saying or doing that? And it really comes from the text itself rather than someone deciding we will take this section and treat it this way or that way.
Of course, if you want the shepherd to be also a king and be in disguise, or have a chapter one as a meet cute moment where she thinks that the king out on his walk is a shepherd, you can add that. But Ibn Ezra's commentary is a really great place to start. If you look at all of the different interpretations, it's easy to get bogged down by how different they are, and all the weird ways that one thing or another in the interpretation doesn't quite seem to fit with the text. Chapter 8 particularly is really hard for most commentators because it's like one day more from Les Mis. You have so many voices and threads of imagery coming together. It's really hard work to work out how the vineyard economics, where she's talking about renting and prices, actually relates to their love, or what's going on with the sort of the caring siblings are talking about other things. And commentators have a real struggle. But I think Ibn Ezra really smashed this out of the park based on his work in Hebrew grammar and then building sort of the narrative on top of that. But we won't go much further this week. Next time we're going to do a deep dive into sort of how the New Testament sees some of this stuff, how more modern Christian commentators see it, how Kierkegaard sees it, and sort of the wonderful worlds that you can go into with different assumptions about structure and form in the book, and hopefully, just really have some fun. Anyway, see you hopefully in a couple of weeks. Bye.
Thank you.